Welcome everyone, my name is Danuta Siemek and I'd like to welcome you to the second segment in my video series all about anger. As mentioned in the previous segment, we talked about that anger states activate changes in our biology, changes in our cognition, which could lead into changes in our behavior. So this segment is going to cover biology of anger and cognition of anger. We need to really stop and refer to our fight and flight response. We're wired for survival. Remember, anger is about dominance, it's about protection, it's about defense and attack. So really, angry states activates our fight and flight response. Fight and flight response is our hardwired genetic wisdom that allows us to perform actions in a context of danger to our survival. We all heard about heroic acts of mother lifting the car to save her trapped baby. You know, firefighters running into blazing building to save survivors. All kinds of heroic action. You see, we are not capable of performing such actions when we are in a calm state. So fight and flight response generates incredible level of energy, and we're not really thinking about consequences of our action as much as we normally would have. You see, there's a beautiful harmony in our body when we're in this calm state. So when something happens, when our eyes see something that we might perceive as dangerous, when we hear something, when we touch something, someone said perhaps something, you know, we're sending this signal into the part of our brain called amygdala, saying danger, it's danger. You see, this part of our brain called amygdala cannot really determine, cannot separate if this is the actual threat to our survival or it's a perceived threat to our survival. Amygdala doesn't know if we're becoming angry and therefore activating our fight and flight response because someone said something like a put down comment to us, or maybe your wife didn't prepare dinner on time, or maybe your children are too loud and you're wanting to relax, or maybe your friend didn't call as supposed to, or maybe your boyfriend called and canceled the date, or maybe so many different things can happen in our life that we can interpret as threat to our self-esteem perhaps, to our adequacy, to our well-being, to all kinds of things. So going back to being in a fight and flight response, so you had the angry energy coming up, so amygdala said, oh, danger, okay, let me just, you know, respond to it. So you're now in a fight and flight state, in a survival state. You're ready for defense. You're ready for protection. Maybe you're ready for controlling other people. You're ready for dominance. So what happens is your breathing becomes faster. More oxygen needs to go through your bloodstream. Also, your blood flows from the digestive system, reproductive system. There's a different flows because your blood is diverted into your arms and legs, just into your muscles, bigger muscles, just in case you have to stay and fight or run for your survival. You see, one interesting thing that happens is the perception of pain diminishes. And I'd like to stop for a minute and talk about this because perception of pain diminishes because we've got the receptors, natural opioids receptors in our brain that release endorphins. So endorphin is actually a natural painkiller. And you see, heroin addict is not addicted to heroin. Heroin addict is addicted to the well-being and euphoria that intensified release of endorphin produces. So you see that, so we're getting into this anger is probably addictive behavior, and in some school of thought, it's actually identified as an addictive behavior because it produces, in a very unusual way, it produces the sense of well-being, power and control and euphoria. So we have that. So the heart rate is increases, blood pressure is higher. So, you know, if you're utilizing anger as your way of coping with life issues, you probably can develop some physical illnesses such as, you know, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, blood sugar level, you know, could be diabetes, could be part of it. So there's all kinds of illness that can occur as a result of being angry a lot of the time. You know, other thing that happens is that our body temperature decreases, because when we have to fight or run for our survival, you know, we don't really want to be overheated. So the genetic wisdom, as we talked about, is already thinking about those things, you know, so to speak. Our perspiration increase. Have you, you know, and that is the first indication that you are already in a fight and flight. Have you ever been in a meeting, in a professional meeting, that you've been told that, you know, we're cutting some positions and, you know, or you're not going to get raised this year, or maybe your presentation is not as good as was expected? You get a wet, clammy palms. You see, that's what's happening, because you're already in a fight and flight. In fact, you might not be angry, but you might be fearful. And I need to say this, that anger and fear, they actually have a very same makeup. Because fight is about anger, it's about aggression, and flight, it's about fear and running away. The other thing that happens, that our eyes become very sharp, and it's like a laser scanning the situation for the possible threat to our survival. Have you ever been in a situation that two people had a heated argument and you wanted to break it up, and you became the target of the anger? You became, you know, maybe you even verbally abused, or maybe you even physically pushed aside, because that's what happens. You know, everything and everyone are treated as a potential harm and as a predator. So other thing happens in a fight and flight, our impulses quickened. You know, the sugar level increases in our blood because we need more energy for action. That's when I was talking about possible diabetes. Fat and protein is converted into energy. And also digestion stops, because the blood flow goes into our muscle. So that's the biology, changes as a result of our angry state. Now our cognition. You know, a lot of the time clients and people describe, I didn't mean to say this thing, I wasn't clear, I wasn't thinking clearly, I wasn't thinking what I was doing. Believe them, because they don't. As we're shifting from the parasympathetic nervous system in our biology into sympathetic nervous system, we're also shifting from one brain to another brain. There is a frontal lobe, which we call executive brain, that is very rational, very linear. This happened and that happened and then this occurred. So when we're making decision, we're using this part of our brain, and we're, you know, thinking, okay, if I make this decision, this is the consequences going to be like this, or if or maybe I need more information before I make this decision. So it's all very premeditated, it's all very rational. However, when we're in a fight and flight state, this rational mind is bypassed. We're not thinking clearly, we're not thinking rationally. In fact, people describe, I wasn't thinking, I wasn't rational. And that is very true, because we are in a state of survival already, induced by anger, perceived survival. All this can happen because someone didn't answer your phone, or perhaps your teenage child took your car and you need to be somewhere. You see, so is it some kind of survival state? Yes, it is, but it's not threatening to our physical survival. However, we still respond the same way. So when it comes to our cognition, our awareness intensified. You know, we're very much aware of everything what is going on, looking for possible threat or attack, or some kind of possible harm to our survival, our self-esteem. Then, you know, like I mentioned, our rational mind is bypassed. So we're not really thinking clearly. We perceive everyone and everything as a possible threat. You see, when we're in the state, our ability to assess situation appropriately is not possible. It's not available. This rational mind is not available to us, so therefore we can't. The other thing is happening also, that we're focusing on the short-term survival as opposed to a long-term consequences. So we engage in some kind of action, we say things that we don't mean to, we might say some things to our boss, not thinking that that might be equal with losing the job, and maybe you already have lost several jobs as a result of that, or maybe you already have lost several relationships as being, you know, in this state of fight and flight. Also, slightest provocation when you're in this state causing your overreaction, because you are so aroused, and really behavior is the next step. You just want to do something. So you will be overacting, and maybe you have been told that, you know what, you're overreacting into this situation. This situation and the way you acted is not really proportional. You know, people really don't act like this in this situation, but you do, because you are in a different state. So, and also, you know, making clear choices is not available to you. So this is what happens in our physiology and in our cognition. Powerful things, like I mentioned before, you know, anger is viewed by some people as an addictive behavior because it creates a very odd, weird sense of well-being because of all that is happening in our body, in our mind, and also the hormones that are released. You know, they can produce a very pleasurable, in some ways, effect. In the next video segment, we're going to talk about the third interplay component of anger, which is our behavior. See you then.